It's one of the entertainment industry's strangest but most pervasive legends, the claim that Walt Disney's body was cryogenically frozen shortly after his death, so that he could someday be unfrozen in the future when a cure for death has been found. The likely origin of the rumor was an article in the tabloid magazine The National Spotlight in early 1967, just a few weeks after Disney's December 1966 death, in which the reporter claimed to have snuck into the hospital treating Disney in his final days, and seeing the deceased mogul frozen in a cryogenic chamber. Soon, other tabloids were running with the wild claim, the story ultimately growing over the years to include such bizarre details as his frozen body, or in some tellings, simply his frozen head, being stored underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. Even today, the legend lives on, with some Disney fans claiming the movie title Frozen was either a playful clue or secret hint to the story's truthfulness from company insiders in the know. It's actually surprising that conspiracy theorists still spend so much time on this easily debunked tale, since there's another popular legend regarding Disney's death that appears to have a lot more truth to it, while still being intriguingly mysterious. And that's the legend of the final two words Walt Disney inexplicably scrawled on a piece of paper before passing away. Those two words? Well, actually, it was a name. A name you probably know fairly well if you're a movie fan. The name was Kurt Russell. It's not entirely shocking Disney might have had Russell on his mind in some capacity or another in his final days. After all, the actor has stated that he and Disney had a close personal relationship when he was a child actor. The two would play ping pong together during lunch breaks of the current project Russell was working on, and Disney would give the young star not only career advice, but also even original background cells from Disney animated projects. Earlier the same year Disney passed away, Russell had signed a 10-year contract with Walt Disney Productions, leading some to speculate that perhaps Disney's writing of the actor's name was in relation to some movie role he might have had in mind for him. We'll unfortunately never know. While Russell admits he has been shown the alleged document in question, he says he's just as clueless as anyone else about what it might mean, despite giving it a lot of thought over the years. But he's also still always quick to confirm how important Disney was to his life and career. While Walt Disney didn't live to see much of it, Russell did make the most of that 10-year contract, becoming a popular teen star in such late 60s and early 70s Disney productions as The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, The Barefoot Executive, and Now You See Him, Now You Don't. While Russell would eventually graduate from Disney and go on to become a beloved movie star with iconic roles in films like Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, Backdraft, and Tombstone, he never forgot his Disney origins, and the man that saw so much potential in him, even as a young child actor. Which is why it was probably extra special for him to celebrate the eve of his 40th anniversary with the Walt Disney Company by returning to the family, with a lead role in a superhero comedy full of emerging young talent that might have reminded him of his own early days at the studio. And while working on this film probably didn't give Russell any additional insight into Disney's writing of his name before he passed away, well, the movie does feature characters being frozen, so at least there's still something for all the Disney conspiracy heads out there. The year is 2005, and Walt Disney Pictures are about to launch the next big superhero family comedy franchise with Sky High. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show about some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Peter Potter, otherwise known as the Amazing Snyder Man, aka Trev.
And I'm Frank Podcastle, aka The Punisher, aka Chris.
Ah, yes, and as you might have guessed from those introductions, we are, of course, doing the 2003 film Sky High, the supernatural Japanese action film directed by Raihu Kitamura, based on the manga of the same title by Satomu Takahashi, which is, of course, a prequel to the Japanese television drama of the same name, starring the same actress, Yumiko Shaku. Oh, wait, Chris, I think maybe I watched the wrong Sky High.
Yes.
Is that possible? Yeah, now I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, man, that's, I like this movie, but I don't know if there's anything about a sequel. No, sorry. That was a joke for like 10 people out there who, like me, actually have the other Sky High on DVD. Very cool, kind of visual feast Japanese action film. But that's not the Sky High we're doing. In fact, we are looking at the Sky High that is the second part of our April Showers Bring April Powers. Chris, why don't you tell the listeners about the version of Sky High we are looking at today?
Of course. It is from the year 2005, directed by Mike Mitchell. Most known for animation. This is going to be a big theme of us talking about it. He made Shrek Forever After, Trolls, the Lego Movie 2. This is written by Paul Hernandez, and then the writing duo of Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle. First of all, amazing names. Just great Hollywood names. Not sure, but they are the creators of Kim Possible. They're very much in the Disney animation family.
Mm. In fact, it was their kind of like their work on Kim Possible that somewhat led to them being involved with this, and we can probably say more about that in a little bit. But that got them there. And then there's also some uncredited writers, which we'll mention a little later. This is definitely one of those movies that you get a sense that maybe the names on screen aren't entirely representative of this, and that's not too surprising for these kind of big studio films. But it sounds like maybe there's some other writers kind of tinkering away at it as well. So this is a 2005 superhero comedy, family comedy, I would say is probably the best way to describe it. I know, Chris, for you, this was a first-time watch. But as I mentioned, this is, last time we did Hancock, I don't think anybody involved in this movie has recently assaulted anyone, so I don't think we have to, preface this episode with a whole 15-minute discussion about the problematic nature of any of these actors. But yeah, this is a continuation of us picking this month to look at a couple... I guess, can you say like off the beaten path superhero films, not Marvel, DC. And in fact, I think it's just kind of interesting. The first thing I maybe wanted to talk about with Sky High is placing it in this time, right? This time of like 2005, because Jesus Christ, superhero movies today, it's all we know, right? It's all we're allowed to like live and breathe. And so I think when you approach a film like Sky High now, especially someone like you coming to it for the first time, it probably has a little bit of an air of been there, done that to a certain degree. Would you like say that was the situation you kind of encountered going into it?
A little bit, sure. I don't want to spoil exactly how I thought about the movie. But a little bit of that definitely. Like this is a movie that is almost, I don't want to say lampooning the genre, but it is like having fun in the world of the genre. But at this point, I've seen friggin' 50 superhero movies in the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm just so aware of all of the gags and whatnot that we'll get into it later. But maybe a little bit been there, done that, but maybe some room for breath of fresh air.
Yeah, what did you do you remember what...
That was a sky pun as well. We were up in the sky with a breath of fresh air.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to step on that incredible pun. You are the Punisher, after all. So.
My man.
Do you remember what... Not that I can't say your relationship with the film, but do you remember... Was this a movie you purposely avoided for any reason? Or was it just something that... Was this ever on your radar, I guess is the way to ask it? Like, before, coming up for this podcast?
No, well, actually, at this time in 2005, I was working at the movie theater. So I was definitely aware of this film. But at the time in 2005, this was kind of around where like Spy Kids was coming out and Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Shark Boy and Lava Girl was the same year, yeah. Yeah,
so I was aware, like it just kind of, from my quick theater checks to make sure the sound was good and the picture was in focus, I just kind of was like, oh, it's like another one of these. So I never felt drawn to it at the time. And then, again, less name recognition. Me and Trev actually have a fair bit of age difference. So...
All right.
No, well, I'm just saying, but like Kurt Russell did nothing for me when I was a child. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't aware of...
And of course... Just to just so our listeners do know, and so they can continue to realize that I'm the better of the co-hosts. You are an insane heathen that says Big Trouble in Little China is a bad movie because you're a terrible human being.
Okay, first of all, I don't want to get into that right now, but okay, I do have to revisit that movie because I recognize when I watched it, I was in a horrible mood, and I think I watched it at like 10 a.m. on a Sunday. So I'll get to it one day after my numerous rewatches of Transformers and whatnot. But Yeah, Kurt Russell, like he wasn't like the guy from The Thing, for me at this point, right? So
he wasn't even like a cult icon for you at that point. He was just kind of he was just a dude who was in some movies.
Absolutely.
Hey, isn't that Captain Ron? Like that's probably what you were saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, on my radar, because skies. Okay. No, but on my radar because I was working while it was out, but yeah, never really drawn to it. You, however, Trev, you are kind of the resident comic expert compared to me. Like, I mean, we have the same fandom, we like the same things, but you're definitely a little bit more hardcore than I am. Specifically, X-Men, which is I think we're going to talk about quite a bit right away here. But you even have a podcast, Days of Future podcast, which is all about the X-Men. So, listeners, if you hate me and love Trev, go there because I'm not there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I know you don't love me talking about my other podcast here because it feels like I'm cheating on you or whatever. But actually, that was the podcast I had first. This is actually me cheating on that one. But whatever.
I'm your mistress.
Yeah, you're my mistress. Days of Future podcast, examining the X-Men. I've been doing that for quite a while, and yeah, I grew up on comic books. It's been a big part of my life. A big part of the reason I do that podcast is I'm cheesy enough to say that X-Men, I believe, is a comic book that when I was younger, I actually learned a lot of important kind of morality lessons from it. I think, a lot of, I was definitely letting comic books be the teachers, so what I kind of learned about like why racism sucks and why everyone is equal came from me reading X-Men comics as a kid, and then like looking up to other heroes such as, Spider-Man, of course, with great power comes great responsibility, which of course I use that power today to host 2 podcasts. So obviously I learned these lessons, but yeah, I've been a comic book nerd my whole life. And so I've always like kind of clocked comic book films. I have a memory of going to see the Tim Burton Batman film when I was 8 years old in the theater, and then kind of seeing every big superhero film subsequent to that, opening weekend. And certainly even like watching, before that, like as a kid seeing like the reruns of those Christopher Reeve Superman movies on TV and just getting into all this stuff. And I'm old enough that you hear about this, but I think obviously the younger kids today who can't appreciate anything, they don't have a memory of when there was a time when me and my friends were like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if Hollywood would actually make like real superhero films and take it seriously? I definitely lived through the whole era of, well, we get a decent one every once in a while, but most of these are hot garbage. And I think what is interesting about Sky High, and again, this will kind of play into our overall discussion about it, because I think you have to look at this film to a certain degree as a relic of a particular time. And that is that really unique time now in superhero film history, in between the beginning of comic book films being taken a little bit more seriously with that kind of run of Blade into X-Men into Spider-Man. You can look at that as really like the triumvirate of when people started to say like, oh, you know what? Maybe there is something more here. Maybe we can, especially after like the crash and burn of the Burton Batman franchise as it got passed on to Joel Schumacher, and then like a lot of like really cheesy bad, superhero films that were made in the wake of that. But then you had Blade, then you had X-Men, then you had Spider-Man. But it still took a few more years until you got we mentioned this last time because of the same year's Hancock, that 1-2 punch in 2007 of Iron Man and The Dark Knight.
Hey everyone, this is Chris, just cutting in here while I'm editing. I realized that Trev, because of his old age, misspoke and said The Dark Knight and Iron Man came out in 2007. Well, he is senile and he's losing track of time as we know it. He may be an expert in comics, but he does not understand the timeline that we are on anymore. So I apologize, but it is 2008. Thank you very much. Back to the show.
And so this is like right in that middle ground. So this is like an interesting era of superhero cinema to kind of revisit, because you look at this film, and right, Chris, you were saying about how now you look at this and it seems like, well, we've seen so much of this and the tropes it's making fun of seem so clear and obvious. I think if someone watched this movie today, they would just assume this was a movie that was made post-MCU, wouldn't you? Because it seems like it might be playing on that, but this is like pre-MCU, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting.
Definitely. Because like, again, in 2005, like by this point we've seen, the Daredevils, the Electras, the Punishers, and everything kind of being so like mediocre, I would say, like a mediocre comic book film. Because you're so right. They hit highs of Spider-Man 1 and 2 and X-Men 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden it started to dip. It started to dip quite hard, again with Spider-Man 3 and X-Men 3 and all these mediocre ones. And then, yeah, you're so right. It's which we'll get into what we say as well, but this one is sort of ahead of its time in that sense that it is kind of going for a bright, colorful comic book flair, like the MCU does and continues to do. So, yeah, it would be interesting. I would love to talk to somebody that a little even younger than us to figure like what they thought about this one after seeing Iron Man.
Well, it's interesting because you just said the words ahead of its time. And last episode, I kind of disputed that claim with Hancock a little bit, right? Where I kind of took umbrage with people who say that movie's ahead of its time. And I said, well, I don't really think so because I don't think it's doing too much about the superhero genre or anything. So I don't know what you think it's doing ahead of a particular time that would work more now. I think Sky High actually is a slightly better example of that. If not entirely ahead of its time, then hitting at just the right moment in the zeitgeist. You already mentioned that, as we'll talk about when we get into the plot, there's some obvious kind of, connections or parallels to X-Men in regards to some of the plot elements of this. But overall, this like more straightforward idea of a high school that is run like a high school, but is specifically for superpowered characters. And then the relationship between the main character and the superhero parents. I was watching this now and I was just thinking, I'd be shocked to find out that Robert Kirkman had like never seen this movie and it didn't at all influence Invincible to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time this movie was coming out, the same year, Wildstorm Publishing, which at the time was like I believe at that time it was an imprint of Image, because it's been both with Image and DC, but they put out a book called The Intimates, which was a kind of more mature take on this idea of a high school specifically designed for the next generation of superheroes. And we even see that continuing today. Pretty soon we're going to get a spin-off show of The Boys on Amazon Prime that is the same concept again, right? An academy for young superheroes. So I think this actually is kind of ahead of its time in that it hit on something that started to gain a little bit more clout. And maybe that's just like a natural thing, right? As superhero stuff starts to really overtake pop culture, what are different vibes and what are different takes you can? It's kind of like an obvious next step to say, well, people also like high school stories, high school movies. This is definitely a movie very much influenced by like John Hughes films and 80s high school movies. So they just say, well, let's do that with a superhero spin on it. But I think that was actually kind of unique at the time. And I remember that being kind of the hook that made this exciting.
I think that's a great spot to actually go back into the actual production of Sky High and the inception of the idea. Because even the producer, Andrew Gunn, he called this The Breakfast Club with Capes. The original idea was actually conceived by Paul Hernandez in the 1990s, and he was pitching it as a John Hughes-style teen drama. It took, obviously, a lot of time for this to gain any traction. It kind of went on a shelf somewhere until Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle were actually writing a live-action adaptation of their long-running animated show, Kim Possible. That never came to fruition at the time, so that got shelved as well. But then Disney was like, hey, well, we like the idea of a superhero high school. Let's get you guys to punch up this old script. So that's when they were brought along. And it sounds like those two writers, they didn't really write the meat and potatoes of the story, but they mostly worked on the beginnings and the ends of it and kind of coming all together.
It definitely sounds like for them it might have been them and the other writers. It was a lot of like Paul Hernandez obviously had already come up with this idea. Sounds like a lot of kind of comedic punch up too.
Yes,
right. Let's make this more joke driven necessarily. I also just think it's funny. I just want to, man. Obviously, this entire podcast is about how dumb studios are. And without making any kind of claim yet about how I feel about this film, I just think it's very, very funny that Disney would say, hey, we're going to pass on that script you did of that show that is already making us money and is very popular, but we like the general idea of like a live action show or a live action movie about a young person with superpowers. We just don't want it to be the IP that already is successful for us. Yeah. Could you instead take the script we've had sitting on a shelf for like 10 years and see if you could do something like that? I mean, I guess it's kind of cool they rolled the dice on that, but what an odd decision to think that they would pick this over Kim Possible.
Well, it's funny because I usually say this in the beginning, but I was kind of waiting to drop it in. The budget of this film, they threw $35 million at this movie, and in retrospect, that's not a lot of money for today, but back then, solid amount in 2005. Domestically, it made $63.9 million, and worldwide, $86.3. So it made some money, but definitely not enough to obviously make a franchise, and that's what we're talking about it. But they threw their trust into Mike Mitchell. As I said, he's a big animation guy. So he was taken with the story, or taken with the idea. He's quoted here. I wanted to harken back to those fun 60s and 70s family comedies that we all remember so fondly, and at the same time to really play and have fun with the genre. He says that Sky High functions on two premises. The adults are all insane, and the girls are smarter than the boys. Therefore, all the adults portrayed in the film tend to be caricatured, while the teenage girls are written as more assertive and powerful than the boys. We'll get into it when we get really into the plot, but I think this was also a little bit ahead of its time, right? Like we're so used to damsel in distress, and then the guy has to save the day, and all those tropes of the genre. But this one actually gets kind of, I don't want to use the word, but it gets kind of woke at times with a certain character.
It feels progressive at times, I think is the nicer way to say that.
Yes. It feels progressive at the time, and it works. Like, that's the thing. It does work, and this movie came out, I mean, at this point, 17 years ago, and just now are movies and TV shows trying to do what this is doing, and I think they're actually doing it kind of poorly nowadays. It's very on the nose, where this one actually does it quite well. But anyways, Mike Mitchell also, we should talk a little bit about some casting. He admitted this project was his dream because he got to bring together some pop culture icons of his.
Well, this is the thing, right? So you mentioned like what the reaction to this film was, and obviously, as you said, it did okay, but it wasn't blowing anyone away with its box office take. But I do remember, again, like, this kind of reminds me of like almost like a slightly more successful version of Josie and the Pussycats, which we've already done before. But I feel like in my memory, I can remember this kind of having that same immediate post-reaction of there being a lot of talk of like, man, people really slept on this movie. Like, this is this might be funnier and kind of like more, witty than you might have thought based on what it was from trailers and everything. But I do know that the big draw at the time, and why people were trying to convince people to check it out, was they were like, hey, man, if you're into like nerdy things, this movie has assembled like a Comic-Con nerd dream cast. And I would say that's definitely true, both with some very iconic people at the time, and then a couple that since this movie have grown more in fame. And so it makes it interesting to go back and look at it. So Chris, do you want to share some of this cast? Because you're right, this is, I'd say, I think this is kind of like one of the most impressive casts overall of a movie we've done yet on this show.
Oh, yeah.
From at least for a particular kind of audience.
Well, let's just talk about the cult heroes of the time, first and foremost. You got Lynda Carter, who, of course, played Wonder Woman.
Herself. Yeah.
You get Kurt Russell, Snake Plissken. You get Bruce Campbell, Ash Williams. You get Cloris Leachman, who was Frau Blucher? How do you say
Frau
that?
Blucher, yes.
Frau Blucher in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, Mary Tyler Moore's show, a comedy icon already.
Of course. Yep. And then, like what Trev just said, those are like the icons of the time, But then Danielle Panabaker's in this movie, and she goes on to be a staple in the CW DC universe. She started on The Flash, am I correct? You're more versed in this than I am.
Yeah, I think she's still on The Flash. I think she's in that for the long haul, I believe. But
wow.
Yeah. Running to season 34, I believe, at this point.
You are still watching that, though, right?
No, I gave up on... I'm still with some of the CW shows. I still watch Superman and Lois, and I really, really like Stargirl, but The Flash... I just couldn't do it anymore, man. Life is too short at a certain point. Yeah.
And then another notable star whose her career really took off after this movie is Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who I think we're both amazing, huge fans of her. Yeah,
but both huge fans of both. I would say probably I think it's undeniable to have huge crushes on, and I think also she is someone who her career has taken off just in general on this, but also into more kind of comic book and like nerd culture fare, right? You think of things like, Cloverfield Lane and of course playing Huntress in Birds of Prey, of course, Scott Pilgrim. So she's like, this wasn't her last dip into this world either.
No.
And this really was her first big notable role. And then Chris, just to like feed off of what you said too, in terms of people who have kind of gone on to more material, you also have Nicholas Braun in this, who right now is kind of one of the people having a moment as one of the stars of Succession on HBO. So he's like kind of, much more recognizable today than he would have been at the time. But I thought was also actually interesting at the time is this is probably coming back to the Mike Mitchell thing and what he was into. Because, you mentioned his whole animation background. But let's give the devil his due. We should also say, and maybe this is why this movie is so progressive, what else would you expect from the director of Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo as well, right? But you're guessing he also probably had his toes just in the general comedy world. So beyond populating this with like the nerd icons that he was obviously looking up to, I think there was a very calculated decision to say, hey, let's also, if we're trying to make a comedy, let's get into some comedy bona fides. We have two of the kids in the hall in this. Yes. We have Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald. And then in a pretty substantial role, probably in the only era where you could call him kind of a star to a certain degree, because this is right in the run of when people were like really loving these movies, was one of the Broken Lizard members, Kevin Heffernan, also given like a substantial role in this as the bus driver. So you're suddenly like populating it with like very, very recognizable comedic faces. And even this is like a smaller one. It's not worth mentioning in the review, but this just kind of speaks to why I think Mike Mitchell was like definitely thinking about this. Is at the very end of the movie, like there's a quick little gag about a couple who's just bought a house, and they're talking about how like, yeah, thank God we didn't even need to get the insurance in the house, whatever. And something terrible almost happens to the house. Well, I doubt you clocked this, Chris, but that was Tom Kenny, who's the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, no shit.
And the wife was Jill Talley, and they were two performers on Mr. Show, which also would have been kind of right in the comedy zeitgeist around this time for comedy nerds, right? So when you're putting in people from Mr. Show, Kids in the Hall, and Broken Lizard, that's another audience you're clearly trying to reach. And it's definitely like that was a decision Mike Mitchell made for sure.
Yeah, I got quite a laugh of seeing Canadian legend Dave Foley playing All-American Boy, which was super funny to me.
My name is All-American Boy. Just go by Mr. Boy.
And it's funny because this is maybe blasphemous, but maybe I was just too young when Kids in the Hall was out at the first time, but I was more like In Living Color and SNL and those, right? I still loved those, but I would catch Kids in the Hall because you're indoctrinated at a young age anyway to watch all Canadian TV. Mm-hmm. But I especially knew him from news radio reruns at the time. Yeah. And I was young enough to be watching reruns of that show. Well, I think, Trev, you tell me if I'm wrong. You witnessed the first AM radio ever, correct?
Yeah, we gathered the family around. We were listening to like The Shadow, and of course, I remember getting so scared when Orson Welles did his classic War of the Worlds broadcast. Just being terrified. But I mean, what can you expect? I was in my 40s. So,
Yeah. Anyway.
By the way, so with the cast too, like we're not even done yet, folks. The hits keep on coming because there's a couple more names we haven't mentioned in terms of people who at the time would have meant probably nothing to the audience, but maybe like now have a little bit more clout. Mm-hmm. Jim Rash is in this, who comedy fans will know as the Dean on Community. He's got a featured part in this. And of course, we haven't even mentioned, you mentioned Caruso, but the other kind of big like adult lead in this is Kelly Preston, who I don't know, I feel like Kelly Preston was unfortunately never the star she should have been. Yeah. But I think, always respected, always gorgeous. I mean, Kelly Preston just looks amazing on screen as she does in this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so this is like kind of, another kind of substantial lead role for her in a career that I wish had more, actually. I think she was an underrated on-screen kind of performer. And it's kind of funny that so far we've mentioned everybody but the star of the film.
well, can we save that? Well, because I want to talk about him more in depth for reasons.
Okay, yeah. Okay, but yeah, so there, like every name we just mentioned, though, like hopefully anyone listening to this who's not too familiar with the film, to a certain degree, like maybe that alone kind of gets you interested in the film, right? To say like, wow, this really is like that's kind of a powerhouse cast, and this isn't a thing like everybody except for Tom Kenny and Jill Talley, who, as I said, they just have one little bit. And they're not the most recognizable anyways. But everybody else we just mentioned, we're not talking about like, oh, they kind of walk by and just do like one thing and go away. Everybody has like at least a featured scene. Everybody has their moment in this. This is a movie that like utilizes this cast. So yeah, I think Mike Mitchell definitely wanted to build a cast and wanted to kind of give them all their moment to shine.
I mean, I think we're burying the lead enough. Let's just get into the movie proper.
Sure.
Will, I just want you to know how proud I am that you'll be attending my alma mater.
From the moment Will Stronghold started high school, he knew he was in for the ride of his life.
Here we go!
Welcome to Sky High. You are the descendants of the world's most legendary superheroes.
All he wants is to live up to his family name.
My parents are the greatest superheroes on the planet.
but he's not sure he's got what it takes.
Step up here and show me your power. Carp. Hero.
If you don't make hero, you're just a sidekick.
Carp. Are you insane? Sidekick.
Now,
All I ever wanted for him was to save the world.
to transform himself,
We can't change who he is. Not without dropping him in a vat of toxic waste.
Where will we even find a vat of toxic?
he'll have to test his limits.
You have 3 minutes to immobilize your opponents and save the citizens.
Remember when we used to use real citizens?
Yes.
And unleash the hero within.
He's strong.
So strong?
He's super strong.
From Walt Disney Pictures, discovering his powers was just the beginning.
Great.
Because the heroes of tomorrow
Hey, you want to dance?
No.
Me neither.
will have to save the world today.
My old enemy always swore he'd have his revenge on me.
Put my dad down.
This summer, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, my boy!
Sky high.
My boy has super strength. Come here. Ow! Sorry. Ow! You are strong.
Will Stronghold has his fair share of anxieties about starting high school. Sky High, to be specific. A special learning facility for the children of superheroes. Will's father is superhuman crime fighter, the Commander, while his mom is fellow champion, Josie Jetstream. However, in Will's first few days at school, Coach Boomer is unable to discover any superhero abilities within him, meaning that instead of joining the school's budding group of heroes, he's been relegated to the rank of sidekick. But as he discovers his true strengths, he'll also learn that it takes loyalty and teamwork to justly become a hero.
That's a good kind of basic synopsis. Obviously, we'll talk about some of the more twists and turns that are to come, because it's I don't want to say it's the most complex plot, but it actually has a little bit more to it than just that. But yeah, so this was Sky High. This for me, I don't know. I've seen this movie. I would say a fair amount. It was one of those movies I didn't see this in the theater. I don't really remember why I avoided it at the time. I wouldn't even say I avoided it. I think it's just one of those things that I didn't clock. Like you mentioned, we were talking earlier about the kind of superhero kind of zeitgeist of the time. And this was the same year that we got Batman Begins and Constantine and Sin City. So some comic book movies I definitely liked, but also Fantastic Four and Elektra, right? So it was there was a little bit of you didn't know yet. There wasn't this level of oh, this is probably going to be good. And so I wasn't too sure about this, but this movie was one that almost instantly just felt like it was on cable all the time. And I feel like I just kind of encountered it on cable quite a bit. So I'll actually let you go first though, Chris, because
Sure.
As someone who viewed it for the first time and was coming to it in this post superhero explosion and seeing this through those eyes, I'd be curious to hear what you think, and then I'll talk about how I feel, or how I felt then and how I feel now.
Yeah, I think that this is pretty great. Just to put it lightly, honestly, it's pretty great. It's like me and my buddy have talked for years about why the hell don't we have an X-Men show? Why don't we have a Hogwarts show? What are they doing with this IP? Why don't we have these yet? And I think this movie is, again, you put X-Men, you put Harry Potter, you put Mean Girls, and you put Speed Racer in a blender. And I like we've said in our Speed Racer episode, that is my favorite movie we've covered in this podcast and might actually be in my top, 20 of all time. But I feel that this movie has such a high energy to it. It's clever, it's colorful, it's creative. Yes, it's covering some territory that maybe we make fun of now in the year of our Lord 2022. You know what I mean? We've seen so many things, but you got to put your mind in the time. I get kind of annoyed when people say, oh, this holds up, this doesn't hold up. And it's like, well, okay, well, fair enough. But like back in the day, it did. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, of course, a movie from 1980 might not be the same as it is in 2022. Do you know what I mean? Like we talked about that even in our James Bond episodes and the problematic nature of the 1960s versus now. That doesn't mean that the old James Bond movies are bad. So I think this one is just, it's really good. Like it's really fun, and it's genuinely funny. And I think because we have such comedic talent on set at all time, like no doubt in my mind are the Kids in the Hall guys maybe wanting to punch up their lines. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's got a simple message about, you know, being trapped in your parents' shadows and living up to extremely sky-high expectations, and just how, you know, you got to accept yourself for what your skills are, and everybody around you has to accept you for who you are as well. And I think it's just a nice, positive, optimistic, fun film, and it works for all ages.
It doubles down on a couple good messages, right? There's that idea of like be yourself, like don't have to live in your parents' shadows, but also the idea of like stick by your true friends, right? Like listen, like stay by the people who actually have always been with you, and don't get sucked into the popularity contest that we see in high school. This hits on a lot. So, Chris, I'll just say something I know you love to hear. I think this holds up. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's the thing. Is like, I'm so happy to hear that you liked this, Chris, because I really didn't know, and I was like, man, I really hope, because I quite love this movie, actually, and that's why I was kind of trying not to like give that away earlier. I probably wasn't doing a great job, but when you might have heard me catch myself when I was about to say I've seen this movie a lot, and I was like, oh, I've seen this movie a few times. Like, no, I've seen it a lot because I really, really like it. Yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time. This was definitely a fun revisit because I saw it a lot at the time when it came out. Like when it hit cable, I would just kind of constantly rewatch it and revisit it. And then for whatever reason, maybe because of the superhero boom, that probably plays a part into it. I was just like watching all this MCU stuff and all these like new DC movies, and this one could get a little lost in the shuffle. But I was really, really happy to kind of revisit it. And a couple things to say about it. So first of all, you're talking about like the tone of it and like that idea of, well, it's still, you know, you might approach it now and you like are viewing it through the prism of 2022, and what does that mean? But I think because it's not making fun of any specific superhero movies or any specific ideas, and still instead just making fun of the overall tropes of the genre, this movie is actually fairly timeless. I think this movie will play in any period you show it, and I think the jokes are still funny today. Like maybe there's some music choices and like obviously costume choices and stuff where you look and go, okay, that seems a little dated. Although even the soundtrack is mostly 90s covers of 80s songs to hit that John Hughes thing. But beyond like visual aesthetic, the tone of it, the jokes, that all felt timeless to me. I was still laughing today. So I think it's like that works really well. And I'm going to make an analogy, Chris, and I think you'll kind of know where I'm going with this. A while back, when you and I were doing, with some other friends, we were doing like a regular kind of movie night. One of the movies we revisited was Galaxy Quest. And after we watched Galaxy Quest, you and I were talking about what to rate it on Letterboxd. And I put forward the time where I said, you know what? I think I have to rate this 5 stars, because it's not that I think Galaxy Quest is like a Godfather level movie. But when you look at it, like when you just ask yourself, what is this movie trying to accomplish? I said, I don't think there's anything that would improve this movie. So I think you were kind of like convinced by that when I said like, you know, I think there's an argument to be made there for what this movie's trying to do. I think it's like near perfect. I'm not saying Sky High is as good as Galaxy Quest. I don't think it is. But I will say on that same level, I was just watching this again a couple days ago and thinking, you know what, for what this movie's trying to be, for trying to be a family-friendly superhero comedy, there's really very, 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 very few flaws to this. It is really like, it's really doing what it's doing well. It's genuinely funny, as you say, it has like a real message, very fun performances. And so, yeah, I think this is kind of a somewhat slept on, like it should be a bigger cult hit at least, if not more than that. I think this is, I don't want to use the word masterpiece, it's not that. But people who like superhero movies and people who are like so into this genre right now, this is something that needs to be revisited and needs to get a bigger audience today. Yeah, no, I agree. Can we just get this out of the way? The worst part of the movie? Yeah, well, yeah, and even that, when you like, I don't know how strongly you feel about it. Oh, stronghold. My man. I agree that it's maybe the weakest performance, but it's not like movie ruining bad. Right? It's not. It's one of those, it's the Ansel Elgort in West Side Story conundrum where you say like, oh, doesn't that suck that like the lead performance can't quite hang with everyone else? I think, yeah.
And of course, we're talking about Michael Angarano. He's a face that pops up in things every once in a while. I'm not super familiar with him, but he is the main character, Will Stronghold, and he is not great in this. And I think he's surrounded by such heavy hitters and people that will eventually become heavy hitters. He's just kind of a goober. Like he's kind of a goober. He's kind of a wet blanket as an actor, like as a performer, like not just the character. The character is allowed to be a little bit of a goober, but I think his performance doesn't sell certain moments. Like I had this thought while I was watching it, and I'm like, who do I cast? Who do I replace this man with?
Can I say who I was thinking, and I wonder if it's the same thing you were thinking?
I guarantee it's the exact. At the count of three, we're gonna say it. Okay.
All right.
One, two,
three.
Michael Cera.
Oh, I let you jump the gun, and that was not my thought. I thought, because I was thinking 2005, I was gonna say 2005 Shia LaBeouf.
Oh, that was my number two. I swear to God. I had this. We need to either go full awkward nerd, aka Michael Cera, or a more manic smarminess, Shia LaBeouf.
Yep.
That's so funny. And especially because around that time, right, 2007, Superbad hits. Michael Cera's right in that line too. So 2007 was a big year, Superbad and Transformers for both those actors. So at the time, it actually works out both for them. That's funny. You pick Shia. That's great. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what I think that the movie's lacking. The movie's lacking some energy from him. You can tell even when he's like nervous, you can tell he's acting. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
It's like I think he's fine in this. Like I said, I don't think there's never a point where I'm like, man, he's like really ruining this. But he's somewhat underplaying it. It's almost like he has this sense that, wow, I'm surrounded by such outrageous characters. And you mentioned the point about how like all the adult characters are so ridiculous in this, right? And then he's got like his friends who are all kind of, some of the friends are like Nicholas Braun is like the clear like comic relief, and he's surrounded by like War and Peace, which we need to talk about War and Peace, just name alone, right? So he's got these big personalities, and I feel like I don't know if he was directed this way or if it was a decision he made where he's like, well, I'm going to try to be the straight man to all this. And I would say in a movie like Sky High, we don't need a straight man.
No.
I think if Will had more personality as well, and Will was a funnier character with a more funny, as you said, manic performance, that's what would take this movie over to like the next level. And then I might even say, well, now it's like a 5-star movie. Now it's like, it's perfect. Because I think, unfortunately, Will Stronghold is the part that's slightly holding it back for me.
Yeah. And again, he's reminding me that he's acting. I that's how I'll put it, because everybody is so earnest in this movie, and that's why I made the Speed Racer connection. Speed Racer, not only is it colorful and bright and wild and weird and this and that, this isn't quite the Wachowskis level of wild and weirdness, not even close, to be honest, but the world is earnest. We stay the entire film with superpowered people. We don't go back to like the normal world and see how, normies are reacting to this. We stay in the world the whole time. So the fantasy really hits. And I think when it's so fantastical and you have this kind of goober straight man, it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really play. Like even the movie's not long. So, I don't even know if it's halfway through, but Will actually does have superpowers, right? And he discovers them in a fight with another classmate, and he lifts the table up, and it's like should be this huge monumental moment, even though you're kind of maybe witnessing, or you're kind of maybe thinking it'll happen anyways, but it doesn't really hit.
Yeah, even the moment after that when he comes home and it's like a clear comedic beat, and it kind of works, but when he walks in and because he's not used to his strength, he pulls the door off the hinges.
Yeah,
that's a funny enough idea, but imagine if he then like kept falling down with the door and just like played that more comedic. That's what's missing there, and it's like that's kind of a consistent issue with him. So yeah, I don't disagree. It's a shame, but can we talk about some of the other performances?
Absolutely.
Because everyone else is hitting home runs here. Let's just get the man of the hour out of the way. How awesome is Kurt Russell in this movie? Not that that's a surprise. Like, Kurt Russell is always awesome, but if that's the thing, if you're a Kurt Russell fan and for whatever reason you haven't checked this movie out, or you just haven't got around to it, this has got to get bumped up to the top of your watch list, because this is Kurt Russell just so leaning into like the cheese of the moment. You just mentioned something about the earnestness of this, and I think Kurt Russell is one of the actors in this who totally gets that. Right? He plays this he plays it with that level of, I guess you could say he's playing it straight, but you get that he understands he's in like a movie poking fun at old superhero tropes.
Yeah.
And he's got that like that Clark Kent Superman mentality down perfectly. And I think some of the biggest laughs for me throughout the film are his very lax parenting with Will.
Yes.
He just is like always so proud of Will and is so excited to have a son who has superpowers that he does not want to punish him for anything, but he kind of has to like lead on to the mom like, oh yeah, I am punishing him. Those are like some of the best bits. I'm not going to say it's like a top 5 Kurt Russell performance because that he's just too good, but I think he's definitely this movie's like ultimate weapon.
I love when Will gets in trouble at school and he goes to detention and then he comes home, like you said, breaking the door, and then Kelly Preston's like, your father's gonna talk to you right now, and then he brings him down into their secret sanctum under their house, and he just immediately is like, oh my god, you have powers, this is awesome. Just tell your mom that I gave you the riot act and I took away your Xbox. And then Will's like, I don't have an Xbox. And then Kurt Russell spins a chair around and he's like, you don't? And he like buys him an Xbox after going to detention. It's so funny. And man, there's so many visual gags. My favorite joke in the whole movie is when the commander and Will are having a father-son discussion in the kitchen, and Will's like basically telling him, I'm a sidekick. And then right away, Kurt Russell's like, I'm calling the school right now. I'm getting this changed. They were always trying to screw me. That boomer always had the thing. And he grabs the wireless phone and he starts punching the numbers in, and he breaks the phone with his strength. And then he opens a drawer and there's like 10 phones there. Like This is a natural occurrence with his anger and doesn't know that he's pressing the buttons too hard. It is so funny. He's absolutely the MVP of the movie, 100%.
That's great. The moment when he's down in the sanctum talking to Kelly Preston, he's playing pool, and he's like kind of aggravated, and he takes the pool cue and just sends it like flying right through the cue ball instead of actually making the shot. Yeah, a lot of great jokes about his strength, and just his comedic timing in this, and just his overall presence. This was actually what was interesting about this movie is like I think at the time this was Kurt Russell's like what was this like his 40th anniversary with Disney or something, as in we know like those who are big Kurt Russell fans might know his career started with Disney in movies like the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and stuff like that. He was one of those child stars for Disney back in the day, and then ultimately graduated into like the John Carpenter movies and starting to get like a little bit more attention as an adult dramatic actor, and then of course a cult action icon. But for him, this is his big return to Disney, and he clearly does not think this material's below him by any means. No. He gets how funny this is. He leans into it, and total MVP status. But as we said, this is a stacked cast, and I think a lot of them are doing great work. Chris, do you want to just tell me because we can probably hit on a few of them, but sure. Who were some of the other standouts for you in this? Like who was like really, really working for you? And I'll share some of mine after, or to say if I agree with you.
Well, of course, Nicholas Braun is Zach. I thought he was funny in his constant,
very, very funny.
His constant his power is glowing, and it sometimes doesn't work, and he pretends to be kind of like always too cool for school, and I love that.
What I really like about his character, what I think what sells the comedy of him, is that he 100% of the time he genuinely believes that his power is awesome.
Yes.
He never it's never played like he realizes that power is useless. Instead, his level of self-confidence in this, despite the fact that he just kind of vaguely glows, and he has a power that only works in the rare situation you get locked in a very dark room. But he's just always so like, yeah, man, of course. You see how I'm glowing? He's just so proud of himself. That's what makes him very, very funny in this.
But that's what's so funny even about all the supporting players, right? Like in an X-Men type movie or show, the supporting players everybody has an incredible power, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what's so fun about Sky High is that it does this like heroes versus sidekicks, like AKA like a high school social stature or like hierarchy. And when you focus on the sidekicks, you can make them have really stupid powers, right? Mm-hmm. Like glow in the dark sometimes, just melt into liquid. That's it.
Yeah, into like a puddle, basically.
Yeah, just a puddle. Turn into a guinea pig, but that's it. Mm-hmm. Yep. And making trees grow and plant life grow. Like it's just kind of, that is what it is. And I think her parents are like vegan or something. Like they talk about like animals don't like being eaten during it, so it's just kind of funny. Speaking about being ahead of its time.
Yeah. Man, Sky High predicting the future of the youth of America.
Yeah. I also really liked the bullies. It's funny because, of course, with a high school movie, you gotta have bullies, and I think that they're kind of the perfect powers for that. One guy is stretchy like Mr. Fantastic, and the other one is really fast like the Flash. And it's funny because the guy who plays the fast guy is kind of like a bigger dude, which I think is perfect for him to be super like fast and stuff. I like that. And they're just it's really silly. I don't know, like the movie's silly, and it's and it works, man. Coach Boomer is hilarious.
Right, okay.
Like, we gotta talk about Bruce Campbell. Let's just talk about
We gotta talk about Bruce Campbell. This show hasn't given us an opportunity yet to talk about Bruce Campbell.
No.
Chris, this is probably gonna shock you. I'm a Bruce Campbell fan. Can you believe it? Can you believe that I love Bruce Campbell? Of course, as someone who like grew up on Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, and just and like just getting so into him as like, and I always have that mentality of, he is our cult star, right? He is the prototypical comic book convention icon. He was that before it became a thing. He's graduated into being like the elder statesman of that. But you probably are aware of this as well. For a long time, there was this general thought of like, wow, it's really cool that he's in stuff like Evil Dead and stuff, and he has his TV shows like Briscoe County Jr. or Jack of All Trades, but why is Hollywood not giving him any like real roles? Mm-hmm. And so like one thing I had to give Sky High credit for is this came out at a time where I had just finally accepted, I had this mentality of like, look, I love Bruce Campbell, but anytime Bruce Campbell's in a mainstream film, it's going to be like a waste. He's going to have like a couple scenes. He's not going to be used the way we want to see him used. It's not going to matter. It's not to say he has a lot of scenes in this, but man, they make the most of him in this. And this really is like one of mainstream Hollywood's best usages of Bruce Campbell, I think. He's like a scene stealer in his couple of moments, both in the initial scene where he gets to run the students through the test to see if they're sidekicks or heroes. He's very, very funny in that sequence. But I also love his friendship with Kevin McDonald's character, Professor Medulla, the mad science teacher. There's some great moments between them.
What if I said it's not just her twin, it's her evil twin?
This Friday, you say?
Medulla, you dog.
But yeah, this movie really utilizes Bruce Campbell very, very effectively.
He's so funny with his tests on the students, where they are so deadly. Like, he'll randomly drop a car on you, and he doesn't know that you have super strength. So the whole time I'm thinking, I was like, how many children has Coach Boomer killed? And I need to see a supercut of it, but. And there's like even like some history, right, between him and the commander, and it's just a really, the world is so lived in, and it's funny because it only really takes place at that school, Yeah. It's amazing. The movie does such a good job of world building at really one location. And,
dude, what a great point! Because to go off more of that and to continue our conversation about like the characters, because you're talking about this idea of like. Just the kind of small details you can include to build this world out. So you said there's an implied former relationship between Boomer and the commander. But to that same degree, let's talk about Dave Foley as well.
Yeah.
So Dave Foley plays Professor Boy because he's the main sidekick instructor at Sky High. And sorry, we keep saying sidekick, but as the movie tells us, it's actually hero support, not sidekicks. Yes. So he's the main instructor for the hero support. We'll just call them sidekicks, whatever. But we find out that's because he used to be a sidekick back in the day. And in fact, he was the commander's sidekick. And he was all-American boy.
You'll be assigned to your hero, and then he or she, what you will wear. I think this is mostly done in an attempt to avoid clashing colors. That's why when I was paired with the commander...
And I don't know, call me a simple man, Chris, but I will still... It doesn't matter how many times I watch this movie. I will be 60 years old revisiting this movie. I will always laugh when Dave Foley walks into the classroom in his suit and just dives behind the desk and immediately pops out in his All-American Boy costume. Very, very funny. Always makes me laugh. But also his sad frustration at finding out that when he talks to Will that the commander never talks about him and never even told Will that he used to have a sidekick, and like his like where he so wants to get back into action and he still wishes he could be alongside the commander.
Oh, and by the way, if you should find yourself needing any hero support, I still do a little freelance.
And also how subtle, I don't even know if it's that subtle, but like the nice little detail that he's clearly also in love with Josie. Like, he has this thing for Josie, and like how much she means to him, and how he just wishes like either her or the commander would acknowledge him. He's also very, very funny in this. Like, again, Dave Foley's a performer I always love, but again, just a standout here.
Yeah, every scene in the classroom with him going over lessons with the kids. Like, that was another thing. Like think about the world building, right? Like, you're in hero support class, and then it does like a montage of them, working with like utility belts and like costume changes and testing gadgets, but not like gadgets that a hero would use, right? It's like truly support level gadgets, and it's just so funny. They do like how quickly you can change in a costume while going behind a door, and it is like you just said, Dave Foley does it like 3 or 4 times in the movie, and every time it is funny. Every single time it's funny. And of course, I have to talk about rules in movies.
What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules?
And I think Sky High is actually great at doing that. Everybody's powers are well defined. They are, their strengths, their weaknesses, everything about it. And it never really crosses any rules of the world, which I love. The one thing, though, that was a little weird to me was that, of course, these children are going to high school in the sky. They're going to superhero school, right? Now, all I'm thinking is
we haven't even mentioned that. This is a school that floats in the sky, like above the clouds. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, but this is high school. So they were in elementary school, and they were in junior high. So what about all those relationships they made? Like, do they just go to high school and then now for the rest of their lives they are friends only with other super people, right?
I think you're not wrong. This is where we get into if you start to pick this movie apart, can you find little issues? And yes, you can. And I honestly though think a lot of them are kind of probably budget mandated, because one thing I was thinking while watching it, and this kind of speaks to what you were just mentioning, was there's this one bus that comes around and picks up all the students for Sky High, or at least all the students, like our main character students. But you realize they're all getting picked up in this like same kind of general geographic area, right? They're all kind of in this like one larger neighborhood. And you're thinking, okay, is that purposeful? Like, is this a neighborhood that is meant to be populated by, superhero families? Well, that's probably not the case, because there's a whole kind of joke about how the commander needs to make sure he's wearing his glasses when he's in his dad real estate agent persona. So clearly they are worried about neighbors seeing them and knowing their identities. So then you're just thinking, well, the movie only ever shows us, in terms of the superheroes, we hear about the other kids' parents, but we only see the commander and Jetstream in action. And we only even see them on news broadcasts. So I was watching this just wondering, how prevalent are superheroes in this world? Is there really that many that one neighborhood could have so many superpowered kids that are going to Sky High? These are the questions that you could let bother you. Or you could just say, like, well, I guess the movie probably didn't have more budget to show more superheroes. And ultimately, who cares? Because, as you said, 90% of the movie takes place at the school anyways. Exactly. So it is kind of a whatever,
But then we do see some of the superheroes at work. So, like, don't they have coworker friends? Don't they have other relationships outside of this? It's just, it's a funny concept, but you're right. If you start to pick it apart, you'll go cross-eyed.
Wait a tick. Basil, if I travel back to 1969 and I was frozen in 1967, presumably I could go visit my frozen self. But if I'm still frozen in 1967, how could I have been unthawed in the 90s and traveled back to, oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
And, you just don't do that. just don't.
I mean, honestly, it is all the kind of stuff that maybe could have been explored in like a sequel or a TV show.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we only have this one. To go back to performances things, I already mentioned Kevin McDonald's Professor Medulla, but I think we should say more about that. I don't know who they cast first, but I guarantee you, when they cast Dave Foley or Kevin McDonald, that's probably where the decision came. Like, let's get another one of the kids in the hall in this, just to have like two of them in there. And Dave and Kevin are my two favorite members of Kids in the Hall. They always have been. It's really great to see them on screen together in this. They have a couple, brief interactions, and you're just like, oh, it's great to see the two of them. But even when he's not with Dave Foley, Kevin McDonald in this, first of all, just the look of him. So he is the mad science teacher, and they do that very kind of traditional old B-movie thing of he's got the giant brain, so he's got like the big head. And he's just got that very, very, like, egotistical, like, it's clearly he was probably, like, a supervillain who was caught, and, like, his punishment is having to teach these kids mad science now.
Raise
From the silliness of the shrink ray to the devastation of the death ray.
And just the way they play that, and as I said, his little friendship with Coach Boomer, just great stuff in this. I'm kind of dancing around Mary Elizabeth Winstead a little bit for reasons. I think we probably don't want to say too much about her character yet. So Kelly Preston also, as we said, she has kind of a thankless role in this, unfortunately. I think if you made this movie today, there'd probably be more push to let her be as funny as Kurt Russell gets to be. But I think what she has here, she's doing well. Just ultimately, her character is maybe not as memorable because she kind of has to play the stern mom. I do like, though, to kind of go back to other things that are funny about their characters, I do like the overall kind of egotism of both of them to, like, near the end when they go to the school dance. And they've, like Will has decided not to come for reasons that, we don't have to get into, whatever. That's kind of getting into the story more than we need to. But he decided not to go, and they decide to go because they've been told they're going to be given an award there. And as they walk in, they say, like, you know what, maybe this is wrong. Why, if Will's not here, it feels weird. We were going to introduce ourselves as like a superhero family now, but that doesn't make any sense with our son. And I love when Kurt Russell's just like, yeah, you know what, we don't really need like another award. And then suddenly the light like shines on them and they go, hey, everyone, the Commander and Jetstream. And they instantly are like, yeah, we are stars. And they just like walk in and completely forget about Will. And then they're like very, very excited to get that award. So I like that as well. Just like playing into the, superheroes probably would start to be really, really full of themselves too. And I think they play that nice. But again, this is that tough thing to do. And this is why I'm going to keep giving Kurt Russell credit in this. His character is egotistical. His character is like a blowhard. His character is clearly full of himself, but you never see him as a bad guy.
No.
And you never don't like him. And I think in a comedy, that's very, very important, but actually tough to do. And I like that he was able to pull that off.
And weirdly enough, because of the way superhero movies are made now, I was waiting for the heel turn. Yeah. I was waiting for him to turn out to be like a villain or whatnot. And he doesn't.
It's the Invincible like connection seems so clear, right? When you're watching it, you're kind of like waiting for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you keep dancing around it. So I think right now, we need to start talking about her. So
Lynda Carter as Principal Powers.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, Principal Powers, she's kind of a pilf.
A pilf.
Principal. Come on.
Oh, you do work in education, so that was one for them.
Lynda Carter looks great in this. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, Lynda Carter has always looked great, and yeah, she's again. It's just nice to see Lynda Carter in a superhero movie.
For sure, and not just a glorified shitty cameo in Wonder Woman 1984. Okay,
which is
so
a glorified shitty movie.
Yeah. I can't do anything more to help you. I'm not Wonder Woman, you know.
If you haven't seen the movie, obviously go see it because we're gonna start spoiling it, like for real, now. But let's talk about Mary Elizabeth Winstead. We both love. We said that before. She's gone on to big things. Two things I do want to mention before jumping in. I just want to throw some trivia at you, Trev. And of course you knew this. But, she starred with this in Sky High with Kurt Russell. And then only 2 years later goes to be in Death Proof with him.
Yeah.
Also,
although, and I'll push that trivia even further, she never interacts with Kurt Russell in that movie because she's the one that gets left behind when they go off on their adventure. Yeah.
Well, another connective tissue that she also doesn't meet up with Kurt Russell, but also is connection. Kurt Russell played MacReady in The Thing, the original from 1982. And then in 2011, they prequelized that movie, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the lead in that film. So yeah.
That one did not occur to me as I watched this. I did not think about it. And you know why it didn't occur to me? Because fuck that prequel. But...
that is very bad. That one is very. Yeah. Isn't it crazy that movie they did film like all of the monster effects practically, and then they changed it?
Do not get me going on this because ultimately, like, it's not a great movie in general. But yeah, me and like the rest of the horror community, like that's why I think that movie has such an antagonistic relationship with the horror fandom.
Yeah,
it's like. The whole reason to revisit The Thing, I know this is a Thing tangent, but you know what? It's always the right time for a Thing tangent.
Absolutely,
Folks,
absolutely.
If you haven't seen The Thing, you are wasting your life. One of the just best horror movies, not just of the 80s, but just in general. John Carpenter's The Thing, incredible. And definitely, still to this day, the best ever practical effects showcase of any movie. So if you're going to revisit it, that's the reason to do it. Say, like, let's do another practical effects showcase. And the fact that fucking modern Hollywood hired this team to do more practical effects, which I've seen the footage on YouTube, looks great, looks really cool, and then says, nah, actually we're going to cover that all over with our typical shitty CGI. Oh my God.
It's crazy.
You know what? I know we host a show about Hollywood. I know we love movies, but sometimes I just feel like Hollywood should just be burnt to the ground.
You might be jealous of this, but I have seen The Thing in 35 millimeter.
Yeah, I am jealous of that. I've never had the opportunity to see The Thing on the big screen in 35 millimeter. I'm sure how amazing was it? It had to be great, right?
Oh, it was so amazing. It was actually the print was well kept for sure, but there was part in the beginning of the reels that was discolored, so it was kind of like it had like this kind of sepia over it a little bit, but like that was fine because it was part of the charm, and I was like, all right, here we go. Yeah, it felt grimy, like it felt like, oh wow, this is actually from 1982 and I am watching this print, which was awesome. So again, thing tangent for Thingcast. But yes, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, she plays Will's love interest. Gwen. Wait, hold on. It was Gwen Grayson. You know, Gwen Stacy and Dick Grayson. And something's up with her throughout the whole movie. You kind of she seems to be manipulating him in some sort of way.
Yeah, and the idea, like, you know, again, this plays into so many high school tropes we've seen before.
Yes.
So Will's best friend is Danielle Panabaker, who's Layla. She's the girl who can control. She's the pacifist vegetarian who can control plant life. And it's very, very clear to anybody with eyeballs and ears and a heart and a soul that she's in love with Will, and he's just, like, totally missing it, right? And this is, like, the trope we've seen so many times, but, again, effectively done here. And their first day at Sky High, he instantly has a crush on the, is she supposed to be a senior? Or she's definitely, like, a grade level above them.
Yeah.
But he kind of latches on to Gwen and instantly starts, like, you know, kind of ignoring Layla a little bit to, like, spend more time with Gwen, and he's very, very excited when Gwen also seems interested in him. Very, very quickly, you start to realize, as you said, Gwen doesn't seem to be, like, the best match for him. And I think at first we were just kind of playing it like, oh, maybe this is just a story about how she's kind of the bitch, right? She's very, like, full of herself. She's trying to get him to, like, leave his friends behind because they're sidekicks, and she's saying, like, no, we're heroes. That's what we should be. But it turns out there's even more to her than that. Chris, do you want to say some more? And this is, again, we're in spoiler territory here, but
so it is revealed that Gwen was actually at Sky High in the 80s, and there was an accident with a certain weapon called the pacifier. And she was presumed to be disappeared. They didn't know where she was for all these years. But it is revealed that actually the pacifier is a weapon that de-ages you and makes you into a baby. And she was turned into a baby in the 80s and then was raised by Jim Rash's character up until she went back to high school to take revenge on the heroes.
That's right. Royal Pain wasn't my mother. Royal Pain is me!
Oh my God. I made out with an old lady.
And her ultimate plan is to reveal herself at the awards ceremony for the Commander and Jetstream and de-age everybody, make everybody a baby, and raise them all again to start her own supervillain school.
Yeah,
it's just so stupid. And it's like
stupid,
it's
silly, but by the way, also when this is the thing you mentioned earlier, you said there's some elements of this that are maybe a breath of fresh air.
Yeah,
when we're so inundated with very, very similar superhero films nowadays, the revelation, because I had forgotten about this, the revelation that the evil plot is to de-age all the superpowered people and raise them to now be supervillains. I was like, you know what? That's actually a pretty, like, legit evil plan. Like,
that's intensive. That's it. That's
yeah.
She has to raise 100 people.
Yeah. And they even make they even have some, like, funny jokes about that, about, like, her having this idea and having this plan, but not really thinking it through to, like, oh my God, now I have to deal with all these babies, right? And kind of showing how she doesn't even know how to, like, put the babies into, like, their carriers, and, like, Jim Rash having to walk her through it.
On the infant restraint. Pinch the two straps together. Pinch, Royal, pinch.
Pinch what? Restraint A or B?
Now you just calm down. Let's go back to one.
I also just love that idea. So Jim Rash, we mentioned, being very, very Jim Rashy in this movie.
Oh,
that's
yes.
for sure.
He's basically playing the Dean.
Yeah, it's the Dean as like as a supervillain sidekick. I just love that idea that, so as you said, back in like the 80s, she was this this villain called Royal Pain. And nobody even knew Royal Pain was a woman because when she's in her Royal Pain like super suit, Patrick Warburton provides the voice. Also, it's always just great to hear Patrick Warburton. I wish we could see him in this, but hey, I'll take Patrick Warburton voice over nothing. But Jim Rash was Royal Pain's sidekick, and I just love that idea that he got turned into a baby, and the sidekick then raises his boss and actually becomes kind of like a father figure. Great moment in that when like they mention that for the first time, and Jim Rash is like, "Daddy's little girl," and she's like, "I told you never to say that."
Stitches took me away and raised me as his daughter.
Daddy's little girl.
I told you never to call me that!
But this is all worth bringing up because I wanted to say, like, in terms of like the twist, I think Mary Elizabeth, obviously you and I, we've said it 100 times already, but we're both fans. But man, like when she like turns into the villain, like this definitely was the first movie where I started to pay attention to her. This is definitely the first movie where my crush on her started. But even seeing it now, I'm like, for like, her being only, I think 21 when she made this, really kind of big like distinction between her as like Gwen and her and like the Royal Pain kind of persona afterwards. And I think she actually does, for a silly superhero family comedy, does a really, really good job in like the supervillain part at the end. What do you think?
Oh yeah, like the heel turn works. Like it's it didn't surprise me at all, obviously, because like you said, it's there's even a shot in the yearbook that they pass over her, and it's so obvious.
It gives it away right there. Yeah,
and I have to ask you, do you think that was intentional? Because the audiences can't be that fucking stupid, right? Like because again, there's the gag in the very beginning of the movie where the commander has his glasses off, and then Layla's like, "Hey, you got to put your glasses on, Mr. Stronghold." And then it's almost like you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And then later on, her picture in the yearbook has glasses on. Do you think that's a gag? Or is it just a total mistake?
When you portray it that way, you feel like it almost has to be, right? But I don't know. Like I've always viewed this, like I feel more like it is kind of a mistake. Not a mistake, but just I think maybe they thought they were more clever. That like, oh, we don't show the picture very long. But you know what? You show it long enough. Yeah. And it's one of those things where they first see it when they're showing Will and Gwen, the commander and Jetstream are showing Will and Gwen this yearbook and saying like, "Oh, remember this girl? She was like really annoying back when we were in school with her back in the day." Why would you ever bring up a character like that, right? It's exactly the Chekhov's gun thing. The moment you tell me the moment you reminisce about some random character you went to high school with, I know that character's important. Then you show the picture, and then if you even like look at Mary Elizabeth's reaction in that moment, you can kind of give the sense of like, oh, she's trying not to react too much. It totally does give it away. And I'll say this is the one thing about this becomes the risk of casting someone in a minor role and then them becoming more known or their persona becoming more kind of popular. The Jim Rash element of it. Whenever you cut to Royal Pain, before we know it's Gwen, Royal Pain is with the sidekick, right? And that's Jim Rash dressed up as this like blue jester character, acting exactly like the Dean.
The boy has Stronghold's power. It's almost poetic.
We should crush him now. We know he has a weapon.
Patience! We've waited this long. When the time is right, we'll have our revenge.
Well, time would move a lot faster if we had an Xbox. Uncle.
And then later, when Will takes Gwen home, there's a scene where like the door opens and Jim Rash is there just looking like normal Jim Rash as the dad. But if you're a Community fan, right there, it all comes together. You're like, oh, all right. So if she's hanging out with if Jim Rash is her dad, then okay, then she's clearly aligned with Royal Pain, if not is Royal Pain. So yeah, you're definitely going to. If we hadn't spoiled this for you, don't worry, you would have figured it out watching the movie. I'd be shocked if anybody was like too surprised by this.
You know what? Also, we haven't really talked about much or really at all, is the special effects, and I have to say, heavy reliance on practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of good practical stuff in this. A lot of very clever gags spread throughout the film. You alluded to this earlier, but they really utilize people's powers well for like different just gags and jokes. But like I said, a lot of that is practical. There's definitely a fair amount of CGI as well. But I think there's probably more practical effects in this than you would expect. Obviously, the producers of the Thing remake didn't get their hands on this one, just plaster all over it. Sorry, not to bring that up again. Let's go on another tangent about it. But yeah, no, like decent effects work. definitely some stuff that feels a little dated. But I will say, Chris, I was watching this a couple days ago, and I you might have had the same thought. I was watching some of the more janky CGI shots. I had that instant moment of like, ooh, but then I was thinking, oh, it's 2005. And then seriously, I had a moment where I said, like, I don't know, this still looks better than Moon Knight.
I said the same thing.
Yeah.
That was in my notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have all the money in the world with Disney in the year 2022, and Moonlight looks like absolute trash. And then I'm watching a 2005 movie with a $35 million budget, and it's got on par and even better because of practical effects than that show does. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. They actually wear costumes in this movie, while in Moon Knight, he just walks around as a cartoon. So that's fun.
Yeah, and the commander and Jetstream's costumes look awesome. He said, in terms of the practical effects, and some of the the flying stuff, even the jankiness of the effects sometimes adds to the charm. You mentioned earlier some of the elements or that make this charming. The scene at the beginning where we watch the news broadcast of the commander and Jetstream fighting that giant robot. It looks so cartoonish and so old school kaiju movie goofy.
Definitely.
That it's in the first 5 minutes of the movie too, which I think is very, very effective because that's kind of the movie telling you, hey, you don't have to take this very seriously. We are making a tongue-in-cheek movie because look how goofy this is. And so that's very nice because it then frees you up to take this movie on its own terms and understand that this is a movie that's just made to make you smile and make you laugh. And the effects, everything I think after that, the effects plays into that. So in terms of Boomer's Sonic Boom voice, some of the effects with the pacifier itself, some of the transitions and the shape shifting, it all works for a 2005 movie of especially one with a $35 million budget. Look, this is looking pretty good for $35 million. Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about the lack of sequel. The movie it did fine at the box office, it did fine, but obviously critically people liked it, but it sounds like it was kind of buried at the time underneath the weight of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and March of the Penguins, both of those movies taking the spotlight away from a family friendly romp, and Sky High just kind of got lost amongst the shuffle because we were looking to see why. We always do research, as we've been talking about here today, but not a lot of evidence as to why this didn't happen because there was talk for years about the sequel. And even 2016, recently, Disney formally announced that Sky High 2 was in early development stages. And the sequel was titled what? Save You, standing for Save University.
Which is great, by the way.
It's awesome.
That is so clever. Yeah, Save You. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know, it sucks that it never took off the way they wanted to. And of course now, in the extended Disney universe, they want everything to make $1 billion. So, I don't know, this one I would have wanted to watch more. I love the idea of going to university. I had a couple other ideas as well, if you don't mind me hearing, or you listening to me.
Course.
Because you don't even have to jump to Save You for the next sequel, maybe even save that for the third. But there's even you could do a foreign exchange school, almost kind of like a Spider-Man Far From Home scenario that the class goes to Europe and there's a different high school there or Europe or Australia and it's Down Under High, or a underwater school, kind of like Euro Trip. But with powers. That's kind of what I would, it would be just another fun, vacation movie.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of things you could do with it. I think one of the things that might hamper it back is the idea of trying to get the entire cast back, especially at this point. So I do have a couple quotes from Mitchell talking about that. And these are fairly recently, as you said, kind of speaking to why did it never happen. And he did say, and this also kind of comes back to what I was saying, where he acknowledges some other writers who at least we can give them their brief credit here. Mike Mitchell says, I am hugely proud of it, and they should make it a franchise. In fact, the same writers that didn't get credit on it, Jonathan Abel and Glenn Berger, they did a lot of writing on that film. And we have a whole sequel that's called Save You. But the only way you can do it is if you bring back all the actors. Mary Elizabeth Winstead has to be in it. Michael Angarano, Kurt Russell has to come back. And then he does go on to say, except for Kurt Russell and Kelly Preston, every actor at the time signed a contract to make it into a TV show. That was going to be Disney's plan. But what happened was when it came out, it was kind of an underdog that no one knew about. So here's my issue with that. I I get the idea of pushing forward with like all the young characters because obviously that's who the movie's focused on. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if this movie works without a sequel works without Kurt Russell.
No.
I do think because Kurt Russell is obviously the marquee name of this. He's obviously the person you put front and center on the poster. And you could make, even if you came back today and did like a legacy sequel and said, hey, let's look at like maybe Angarano and Danielle Panabaker now, they have like a young child and suddenly Mary Elizabeth Winstead gets loose and now she's trying to get like their baby or whatever. You'd still want to have Kurt Russell in there as the super granddad. You just can't do it without him. And unfortunately, obviously the giant shame of it all is we've unfortunately lost Kelly Preston, which puts a little bit of a damper on that as well. Obviously that's not the biggest concern there in terms of her loss, but that's just kind of a bummer. And so to not be able to get the whole cast back together, I don't know. I think I'm surprised Disney's not talking more often about rebooting this today in terms of like where we're at. And that is one thing where you say like, why didn't it happen? What didn't work? Chris, don't you agree when we talk about this movie being ahead of its time? This is one case where I think you can point directly to it and say, that is actually true for this. I think if this movie came out like 4 years after it did, I think it would have been a bigger hit. I think this was one where I think the problem with this movie was it was making fun of a genre that hadn't blown up to the level it needed to be at for the people to get the joke of this movie. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like, this movie coming 3 years into the MCU when people are going like, oh, okay, superhero movies, yeah, that's the thing. It's becoming the thing. And then this movie taking a piss on it a little bit, then you would get it more. I think this movie just missed its mark by it came a little too early. So yeah, it sucks because Save You is a great title. The ideas you pitched are all great. I would like to see these characters again. I don't think it's going to happen. And if it does happen, I imagine it will be like a Disney Plus thing that probably would be like a new generation or just kind of a do-over, which I'm not opposed to. But
I don't even think that would happen.
Not what I would have liked to see.
Well, I don't even think that'll happen because Disney's in the Marvel train, right? If they're gonna make a superhero-powered school show, it's gonna be X-Men. You know, it's gonna be a school for gifted youngsters. It's not gonna be Sky High. I think this brand, this franchise, this IP is probably dead and gone because just Disney has moved on, and that's a shame. Even if they wanted to reboot it, I just don't think it's so far in the rearview mirror at this point. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it is too bad because like one thing you can say that kind of speaks to what is nice about this movie is it seems like everybody really who was involved in the movie really is proud of it and had a good time with it. As recently as last year or a couple years ago, Mary Elizabeth Winstead was doing interviews online where she was kind of as like a little fun activity pitching her idea for a sequel to this. And Chris, I sent that to you earlier. I don't know how much of it you got a chance to see, but I like that she just kind of said it as an offhanded joke. But I like that she said if like she came back as Royal Pain, since she already tried to turn people into babies, maybe this time she could try to turn the superheroes into very old people.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Actually, that would actually be great. That would be like a funny redo of that. So we at least know, and I take her at her word. Like she actually seems still proud of this movie. It was like her first like major role. I actually think she would come back. I'm sure a lot of the rest of the cast would. I bet you could probably get Michael Angarano to come back. I don't know how busy that guy is. I'm guessing he would sign on for Sky High too. So yeah, I think the cast is down. I think the fans of the movie are down, but unfortunately that's not what's going to move the needle there. So
and honestly, Kurt Russell has never left the Disney family. So I mean, he is in the MCU technically. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's so I think we can officially put this into. This is one where we're bummed there wasn't more. I think, right? Like that's. I'm glad this movie exists. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad it always is there on Disney Plus for people to rediscover. And I think I've definitely seen that a little bit. I feel like every year or so I see some like movie website publish like a. Sky High is a superhero movie you should know more about. Here's Sky High is one of the best superhero movies. Sky High is the takedown of the genre the world needs or whatever. So I think this movie will continue to build a little bit more of a cult audience over time. That's my hope. And it's awesome that it doesn't end on such sequel bait that it's frustrating. It tells a complete story. Yeah. So that's all good news. And basically what I'm trying to say is if you're listening to this and you love superhero movies or you love Kurt Russell and you haven't checked this out yet, make it a priority. Sky High is one of the better movies we've done on this show. I'll go ahead and say it.
It passes the Dredd test. We haven't said that for a while, but this absolutely this is as good. It's up there with Dredd. It's obviously different subject matter,
Right, subject matter, tone. Like you're going to walk in this movie with different expectations, right? Take this movie for what it is. But I would even say you might go into it thinking like, oh, okay, they kept saying it's like a funny Disney like family comedy. I know what those are, but no, the jokes in this are legit funny, whether you're like a young audience member or an adult. I think the comedy in this, because when you populate it with very, very funny people and a clever script, it doesn't matter how old you are. This just works.
Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed April Showers Bring April Powers. We love our theme months. It guides us through this journey. And, sometimes we get kind of meh to that is Hancock, or we get Sky High, which, again, is we were quite high on as well. So we are going into May, and we thought, let's look at a movie from 2015. Now, Trev, I'm sure you know there's a certain franchise that is very special to the month of May. And then in 2015, it had a force to be reckoned with. And I think we just need to cover it. It was a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. I remember the anticipation was off the charts for this movie. Yeah. Like, to a level you don't see very often anymore today.
And there was, like, returning cast members from the old film. It was just unbelievable. So, like, it was
because, like, honestly, remember, we had all just accepted there's never going to be another one. Absolutely. That was the thing. We were like, of course there's not going to be another one. And then I remember where I was when the announcement was made. No, there's another one coming.
Yeah, and again, it started that legacy sequel trend that we see time and time again now, taking the old cast members and passing it on to the new generation. Mm-hmm. So, for the month of May, we're calling this May the Farce Be With You, and we're looking at 2015's Vacation.
Oh, wait, what did you all think we were talking about?
Yeah, we're looking at Vacation from 2015, the legacy sequel from the National Lampoon's films, and then Mordecai from 2015. Yeah, that one, not so much connection.
We just spent like an hour and a half talking about this comedy that we both loved. And now I'm like, you can probably hear I'm like rubbing my temples thinking about the fact that we have to go watch Mordecai and Vacation. Now, to be fair, these are first time watches for both of us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we actually don't know if, like, who knows? You and I might end up loving Vacation and Mordecai. Anything is possible. Anything is possible in this.
I know we kind of set it in stone here, but which one do you want to do first? Do you want to leave off on Vacation, or do you want to leave off with Mordecai? What do you want to do?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I would rather do Mordecai first, I think.
Okay. Well, especially since, Johnny Depp's in the news right now, with his trial.
Oh, why is that?
Get those SEOs. Okay. I hadn't heard. So yeah, that's what we're doing. May the Farce Be With You. Mordecai and Vacation, both from the year 2015, the summer of comedy. So, follow along with us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2F pod on Twitter, Insta, all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, rate, review, whatever you do. Give us a star rating. Review, that'd be awesome. And just join the tribe, hit that subscribe, and keep on with us, because this was a lot of fun. No promises on the next ones, but I'm sure we will make it fun at the least.
Please keep listening. Don't make us watch Vacation and Mordecai for nothing. Don't. Yeah, please. If I find out we watch this and nobody's listening, like, why? What a waste. It's already a waste of my life. But please give me some value for this.
Oh, Trev, before we go, as Frank Podcastle, aka the Punisher, we have to give props to the best pun name of the whole film in Sky High, and that is War and Peace. That was amazing.
We briefly hit on it, but we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't give more of a shout out to the name War and Peace. Yeah. Screenwriters, whichever the 4 screenwriters, or 5, I guess, 3 credited, 2 uncredited, whichever you came up with War and Peace, take a bow.
Will's father is a superhuman crime fighter, Captain Stronghold, while his mom is fellow champion Josie Jetstream.
Wait, Chris, I'm going to cut you off. Because that was wrong. Russell is the commander, not Captain Stronghold.
Okay, then, okay. That's okay.
You got some bad information. It's something you looked at.
Yeah, no, that's what it was.
Sorry, I didn't mean to fuck you up. But
No, that's fine. No, I want you to fix that. Okay. Will's father is superhuman crime fighter Commander Stronghold. The Commander or Commander Stronghold?
It's just the Commander.
Oh, it's just the Commander. Oh, fuck. I can't even remember. Oh, yeah, like, why would he give his last name? That's fucking stupid. Fuck, that might be our post-credit scene.
His full superhero name, Commander Stronghold, serial number, social security number, phone number.
7325 Spruce Lane. Okay.